Oh, yeah, it's,
Did you ever got that in your
it's super smart.
Yeah, no, we were crying, like, are we gonna make it or not?
I know, yeah, yeah.
Well, today didn't turn out to be too bad with the snow.
Yeah, I was excited about it. We were watching it.
Every time I said, you know, because we're
Get down with it.
with the life out? Several years old. It was growing dusty after the last time she touched it.
I'm hanging in there. How are you?
How are you?
Good to see you.
Occasionally, but
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our January 25th, 2023 committee meeting for York City Council. At this time, we will call the meeting to order. These are committee issues that will be on the February 7th and February 21st legislative agendas. So up first, we have community and economic development. So I'll turn that over to Vice President Washington.
Thank you, President Walker.
Real quick, that's okay. You want to say that, or if there is a public hearing going on upstairs for the substantial amendments to the action plan for the home ARP allocation. So if anybody is here for that public hearing, that's upstairs right now. So just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
Thank you, Diana. Moving along to our committee items under the Community Economic Development. Today we're here to bring forth council for committee discussion. The first item up is the resolution authorizing the substantial amendments to fiscal year 2021 annual action plan to approve the home ARP allocation plan. And we do have Kate Molinaro with M&L Associates with us.
Thank you for the opportunity to
Sorry, you're cutting in and out, and can the volume be turned up, Cliff? There's an echo and you're freezing.
Kate? She can't even hear us. I don't think she can. Kate, can you hear us? We're having a very hard time hearing you. You're cutting in and out, and your volume is very, very low. It's still very low. Give us a few seconds. We're going to see if we can fix it on our end.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay, I can't do nothing about that.
Are you able to turn the volume up on your device? Mm-hmm.
Well, I read it.
Yeah.
So what you just basically need to say is we can find out.
Selena, can you see if she has a headset with the mic so she's not going mic off of the computer and she's doing mic off of the device?
Kate, can you hear me? Are you using a headset or are you just using your voice through your device?
Can she get one?
Do you have a headset? Yeah. Whatever you did, we can hear you better now.
All right. Well, I'll keep going then, and I'll just talk. So, just again, the Home American Rescue Plan provides supplemental home investment partnership assistance to the city exclusively for what HUD is. And these are individuals and households. The city will receive about $1.9 million from the home ARP allocation. The city was responsible for preparing the allocation plan. No later than March 31st of this year, 2030. So there's time to spend the dollars, but HUD did impose this deadline.
Kate? Kate?
Yes.
Unfortunately, you are skipping in and out. We do have our director of our Economic and Community Development Department, Ms. Nona Watson here, and possibly maybe she can come up and share because you're cutting out and we can't hear.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Nona.
You're welcome. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah,
Good evening.
Kate, are you still there? You can hear me all right? So basically what she was saying is that the city received $1.9 million. This is for home ARP, and this is different. The process is different from the way we did the general ARP plan. HUD lays out exactly what it is that we are to do in a time frame. So Kate is our consultant, and she has been meeting with like service providers. She met with council and everything. So we're just gathering information that's going to be sent to HUD. Basically, the response that we received is that we want more housing units because, of course, we're in the middle of a housing crisis. So what we're doing now is just gathering feedback. We want everyone to know we're looking to do an 8-unit project. All of this is to prevent homelessness. So that's why we're here tonight, so you would know exactly what it is that we're trying to do. So that's it. And she had given deadlines, I believe she was saying like by March 31st, certain information had to be presented to HUD. HUD is going to respond to let us know if in fact it works. And that's pretty much what it's all about. Any questions? You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Does anyone on council have any questions? I do have a question/comment. If we are approved for the funding for this great opportunity for our community, my only question is, are we able to maybe put in a caveat, or I don't know if we can, or ensure that the organization that may get the opportunity to build this project out and whoever's renting the properties, that the information that was mentioned in this report, specifically on page 14, about denying tenants the ability to rent because of delinquent rents, because of, COVID, family issues, domestic violence, sexual assault, things like that, and them having to leave their home and have a poor rental record. Would we be able to maybe put in a caveat that those individuals wouldn't be just pushed off and denied? Because my thought pattern is, if we're trying to prevent homelessness, it's kind of adding to the cycle again over again. So I don't know if we can legally do that, or if there's any way to ensure that the organization that maybe gets the RFP to build out this wonderful program for our community, that individuals that truly need the properties are not denied because of their delinquent rents or things like that, because of maybe situations out of their control. Because I know it's mentioned in the report that that's an issue in our community, which we all know that it is a huge issue. But my concern is that we don't want to put other red flags up that put a barrier up to a great project that can assist those in our community.
Yeah, I'm sure we can. Let's check to see. Kate, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I can try to answer. Hopefully, you get a complete answer. But certainly, when you issue the RFP for a developer and an owner manager, you can certainly use that as, I won't call it a select criteria, but you can make clear in your RFP that it will be expected that the owner has low barriers for applicants, and identifying partner agencies that in your community already offer low barrier housing that wouldn't necessarily weed out a tenant based on their prior rental or eviction history.
Thank you very much. Is there any comments or questions from the public? Oh, I'm sorry, President Walker.
No problem. For page 8, I know this is a draft. When I'm looking at the public participation process and the efforts to broaden public participation, is that still a section that needs to be updated? There's no responses for those answers.
Yeah, so that section will be updated after tonight's committee meeting, as well as the public hearing that Tammy is running upstairs. And so, we'll put the results of all of the public participation opportunities that were provided and any responses, comments, questions received, and how they were incorporated into the plan. That will happen after this evening's meetings.
Okay, thank you. The only comment I have is just pleased to see the outcome and the results and the feedback in regards to affordable housing units, and looking forward to the conclusion of this. We all know affordable housing in our community has been an ongoing issue, and the city taking the initiative to spearhead this is wonderful, refreshing, and we're looking forward to the final result. So thank you.
Are there any comments from the public? Okay. Thank you, Nona, and thank you, Kate, very much.
Thank you. I apologize. The audio was so spotty.
That is okay. Technology does that to us sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to move this forward to our February 7th, 2023 legislative agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. This will be moved and presented on our February 2nd, 2023 legislative agenda. Our next item up for discussion for committee this evening is resolution authorizing an agreement with the County of York for the amount of $319,729 for the Healthy Moms and Healthy Babies program. Would you mind? Yes, ma'am.
Good
Thank
evening. I'm
you.
Monica Kruger. I'm the director of the York City Bureau of Health. This item is presented to you all because it is a grant that actually started July 1st of 2022 due to no committee meeting in December and delays in the county getting final signatures on their end and going through our process. That is the reason why it is being presented now instead of as part of the budget in 2022.
Thank you, Monica. Is there any questions from anyone on council regarding this agenda item? Is there any questions from the public? Okay. I would like to make a motion to move this to our February 7th, 2023 legislative agenda. Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. This item will be moved forward and placed on our February 2nd, 2023 legislative agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Washington. We'll now move on to general items. Up first, we have a SafeNet project proposal discussion from Mr. Aaron Anderson.
Great. Thank you, Council. And let me just kind of catch everyone up on where we are. You'll recall that Better York had solicited a study that was a three-phased study some time ago, and that first phase of that study was concluded looking at whether a camera network was advisable, what the community's input was on that, and so that was concluded. That report was done by Montez Parker and by Steve Butler. And the second phase of that study, which is the proposal that we're preparing as Logos Works to lead, is the second phase of that. And the reason why, and I know we're still trying to figure out what council action would need to be taken on that, is obviously that would require some use of some form of city infrastructure, whether it's traffic signals, power there, or light posts. And so basically what I can tell you in terms of what that proposal looks like from our standpoint would be to lead that study. It's about a 2-year project that would look, first of all, really in in three phases the way we're seeing this. The first is a feasibility sustainability study. That's basically looking at who is paying for this, because this is not an infrastructure that we're proposing would be owned by the city, by any city government, or by police, but it'd be owned very similar to what is done in Lancaster by a nonprofit entity with a nonprofit board overseeing it, to address some of the concerns there. So the first phase would look at feasibility. Who's paying for this? How are we paying for this on an annual basis? And really the question, is this a sustainable plan for the community? The second phase really goes into a planning, and that would look at that in three components. The first is looking at governance. What would the makeup of that nonprofit entity look like? What's the highest and best practices that are found where this is being done? So there's a governance component, obviously a design and engineering component, which goes into cameras and is this fiber, is it wireless, is it some other type of technology? So a design and engineering component, and then the third aspect of that would be a financial component. That's really looking at budgets, annual operating budgets, and then developing the funds it would need to actually build and construct such a system. The final component is actually pre-construction. That's actually gathering funds, preparing to build, and putting everything in place before construction takes place. That would be this is a 2-year. We envision this as a 2-year study, a 2-year project, leading to that final third step, which is actually funding it, building it, and then turning it over to whatever nonprofit group would be overseeing that. And so that's what's being proposed. I know we've had some conversation about what the right infrastructure, if you will, or plan to get approval, because we do believe we need council and city's approval depending on which infrastructure is being used. So I know there's no resolution in front of you, but at least wanted to get in front of you and give you where we are at this point. We're ready to proceed. We're ready to proceed with this proposal at this point. So at this point, as I said, we don't have a resolution in front of you for approval for that, so we're still trying to figure out what that mechanism would look like.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? All right, well, I'll start out with a comment. Thank you for getting the information to us. I know this is personal and confidential, so the details can't be discussed. But for the public, just to give probably just a brief update of some of the work that has been done so far. Council really started to get involved with this in probably about August. And that was after Commissioner Muldrow's forum on violence in August. And there were questions for me personally that I had for about a year, over a year. And it was more or less the gray for me. We're at point A, we want to get to point Z, but how are we going to get there? What are the details, the policies, procedures? What is legal, what isn't legal? And from that, Commissioner Muldrow and Captain Lentz did whatever they could do to help council get a better understanding of how things could possibly look here in York. That was going down to Wilmington, Delaware to see how their more collective approach with ShotSpotter cameras, partnering with another entity for the operation of the cameras, in a sense, a more collective approach would look like here in the city. And then we also went to Lancaster. Not only did we go to Lancaster to see what LSC has to offer when it came to the operation of their cameras, but we also were able to meet with a board member from LSC as well. So between that, actually seeing things in person led us to more questions, but it's still that gray area. And the work that's going to be done here from Logos Works isn't a part of the internal approach or endorsement from the city, because this is supposed to be separated. But it answers a lot of questions that council, I feel, when a resolution does appear before council, all of council who is going to vote on that resolution will be able to be comfortable that the decisions are being made, due diligence has been executed, and is for the best interest of all of our citizens here in the city of York. So thank you all for the past couple of months for all the work that has been done. And I know I look forward to more work and more information and more meetings and more discussion, but I feel as though this will fill a lot of gaps when it comes to cameras in the city of York. Any questions or comments from council? Do we have any questions or comments from the public? You can come on up. You can come up to the microphone. It might be a lot of getting up and down for you, Aaron. Sorry.
Have you yet, or are you planning on retaining any counsel for this feasibility study, or will it all be done?
Good.
I'm sorry? Your name. Sorry, Ryan Brinkerhoff. Say that again. Ryan Brinkerhoff. H-O-F-F, but very close. Thank you. Yeah, so are you planning on retaining any counsel for the feasibility study, or have you already done that?
Yeah, and the answer to that is yes, absolutely. I mean, as Councilwoman Walker, you alluded to, our job, we would see it, is to be a servant to the city and to help investigate, you know, what the best structure is of this. So obviously a legal component of that is going to be vital, making sure that what we're doing here, you know, is in line, like as I said, with best practices, with honoring civil liberties, all those sorts of things. So we absolutely, that's would be part of the overall proposal.
I'm sorry, just to clarify.
Yeah.
You'll need to come up to this one.
I was referring to counsel as far as conducting the study, not legal counsel. As far as, you know, are you employing anyone to actually conduct the feasibility work, or is that all being done internally?
We intend to. We will be employing some of our own.
You might have to come up to the mic. I'm not sure if.
Employing some. I think if I'm answering your question, yeah. Employing some of our own staff and then contracting out where we need expertise.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the public? Come on up.
Hey, good evening. I I'd like to thank Mr. Anderson for the information and the presentation. It's always good to see you. Big component for me should be the one regarding oversight and transparency. How does it fit into the overall technology deployment path? Clearly, this is something that's not going to exist on its own. It's also going to be integrated holistically with ShotSpotter and whatever other surveillance assets we're going to have here in the community. How does it play into, for example, Commissioner Muldrow's intent to have a technology advisory group? Is that something that will be programmatic? Would it be ad hoc, or has it been considered at all in terms of the evolution of this project? I think that we can get lost in the technical jargon and in the policy making, but one thing we can all do, no matter your vantage point, whether you're behind the desk, you're in the community, off in the Peeler Gallery, doing little Facebook hot takes, or you're here in chambers, is you can sense and feel, is this something being done along with us, or is this something being done to us? And I'm not sure at this point that this is something that's being done along with us. Perhaps you can help me understand what your thoughts are in terms of what we'll actually see and be able to not just witness, but also have a hand in as a community.
Yeah, I'll do my best to answer what I can, and some of this I'll say is opinion, as opinion, and yet like to be studied. Right, I believe a camera network has to have substantial community buy-in. I think the design of the system has to be done in a way that protects civil liberties and protects the concerns that are rightly going to be raised by groups and by folks who should be concerned about government having too much insight into our lives and too much control over our lives. So that being said, it would be my intent, and again, speaking as a servant of the community in this respect, I think it's going to be our job to study the best ways that can be done. To devise and study where this has been done elsewhere and how we can improve on that. I think, speaking again from my opinion, I would like to see the concerns of those who have the highest degrees of civil liberties concerns, that those concerns are satisfied, and that council, that your concern, the mayor's concerns are satisfied, so that we can have an end product that serves its purpose, but it has limits and has controls on it. And I hope that answers the question.
That's
Hi, man. Can I jump in and just give you a
sure. Yeah. Please, I didn't even see you there.
How you doing, sir?
How you doing, my brother?
Mike Muldrow. I just wanted to chime in with respect to the technology advisory group and that piece. I wanted to make sure that I addressed that for you and for council, since we had members of council that were present for that group. Ms. Betsy was with us. The only difference with this item is the fact that nor city government is going to control it or be responsible for it. So because of that, we haven't been, as a police department, taking the same steps towards the furtherance of the citywide camera network like we did with the ShotSpotter, since that would be something that would be a tool for us. Or even when you were part of the panel. For anybody who didn't know, he was part of the technology panel. The other piece being the drone. Since those were items that we are physically going to be using ourselves, that we're looking at finding funding for and proposing, we wanted to make sure that we had that community input, that we had that sounding board group to really be able to bounce it off of. This being that it is, while I've been a proponent for it and I've been screaming from the rafters every time I've gotten a chance, camera network, because I see it. I see the 20 some odd homicides here and the 6 that Lancaster had, or 5 that Lancaster had. I see it as a viable option to keep our community safe. So I've been yelling for it, pushing for it, and screaming for it, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a community group such as Aaron Anderson's that will be the people that develop it, further it, and do the oversight. So I would absolutely recommend the technology board that we assembled and put together, because they were awesome and they were definitely advocates, and they brought a lot of stuff to light that we may have or may have not thought about. beforehand, but that would be a recommendation that I want to let you know that I would absolutely make, that you guys use that same board that we put together, that same panel we put together. So I just wanted to chime in and say that. Thank you.
Just want to finish by saying, first, one quick question, please, if you would allow it. Do you anticipate that you will be using facial recognition with this prospective system? If it's not preliminary at this point to ask.
Yeah, I think it's probably too early to ask at this point, simply because I think one is we just haven't done enough research in terms of, we know the capability is out there. We also know the concerns that are out there about facial recognition, and as well as some other technologies. And so I think that's to be determined as part of the work. You know, one is like, what kind of technology we'll be using, what infrastructure is required to actually do that, right type of technology. So that will be studied and determined, and then at the end of the day, it's going to be a cost question. What does it cost? Who's paying for it? And how do we pay for it? And the last thing I will say, going back to following up to Commissioner Muldrow, one of the benefits as we're looking at this and studying it with a nonprofit group overseeing this is the ability, while I'm in support of the technology advisory group, is you can set up a nonprofit in such a way that literally it is owned by the community then, and making sure that that board is representative of that community, I think is going to be really key to make sure that we have board members there. If I was constructing that board, I would put members on that board who are suspicious of a network like this. Because I would want their buy-in, and we'll have the ability to do that. That has not been designed yet. That's part of the study. So,
because you said facial recognition, and I'm going to beat Miss Sandy to this one because she went on a visit with us. I've been a proponent for the Lancaster model the whole time. Not Wilmington's, not Baltimore's, not anybody else. I've been a proponent for the Lancaster model. And she can attest to this for being there, just like Captain Lentz can attest to. The Lancaster system has the capability to do facial recognition, but they don't use it. And they flat out told us and showed us they intentionally don't use it. And they actually have the board set up that they already brought in opponents to the process to be on the board, including, I believe they even had at least the offer, I don't know if they said they took them up on it, but they even had the media. I know they said had been offered. Yeah, I believe they said there was a media seat that had been offered, and then there was somebody else that was offered that, who was the group that hadn't taken them up on the board seat, but they made the offer? Because I remember for us, it was pretty mind-blowing. I don't have my notes in front of me. Yes.
That was just for a discussion, like they invited them to the table.
To offer them a board seat. So I just want to make sure I'm clear. It's the Lancaster model that I have been a proponent for that I want to see here because it is so transparent, like Aaron's saying. So.
Certainly, and I thank you for that, Commissioner Muldrow. He's been very consistent with regards to what model is preferable, at least for York. Even though these are all preliminary discussions, I simply wanted to make sure that from the outset, we establish those guidelines and how we're going to frame the discussion and also the pathways forward. It struck me, Madam President, when you mentioned that as these discussions go forward, you wanted them to be policy-based discussions. And that's why a lot of times I'm a bit hesitant to speak too much. Sometimes maybe even to ask a little bit too much, but we have to be sure, as early as the process is, that we want to guide this the right way. We've not always done that, but I think that we have the opportunity not only to look at best practices, we can establish best practices as well. It's not enough to look at something and say, those goalposts look good to me. Sometimes we have to establish our own turf. And I think that particularly in a place like York, that'll be the prudent way forward. I'm always willing to have a dialogue. There's certain things that, on principle, to me, I know I'll start at no. We have good members of the community leading this forward now, but that only leads me to be even more poignant in my expectations and more demanding because I know the caliber and the character of some of the individuals involved. I have high expectations going forward. We're going to have accountability concerns. If it's not going to be a government body, that puts us, again, to use the term gray area is pretty apt because it becomes a moving target in terms of accountability. You lose the opportunity to say the buck stops here at that point if you're not careful. And that's something that you should remain cognizant of as this goes forward. And please, by all means, once you have information that you believe is digestible and you can present to the public, please let it out. Even if it's something that you think it's small, that might be something that matters, maybe not necessarily to me, because I might be jaded, acclimated, or might think I'm over here, but to somebody else, that might be the spark that brings them into the discussion. And that shouldn't be lost on any of us. No matter how many times we say that this is not a police or a state or government initiative, it's not what it's going to look like to the common person on the street, to the common person in the community. Because ultimately the enforcement and the goal is a law enforcement one. And that's the way that it's going to be received.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the public?
Thank you. Ryan Brinkerhoff again. I brought up the question of counsel earlier because I have a degree in political science from York College, and I've been working as a nonprofit consultant, specifically focusing on feasibility studies and capital campaigns for large projects like this for about the past 10 years. So I know quite a bit about what goes into projects like these. And I actually first became involved with attending city council meetings and things like that because of the public forums that were regarding these, because I saw this as a big red flag, because nonprofits are not suited to this type of government. I know it's been brought up several times that this is an asset to the program, that it would be governed by a non-governmental entity. And the reality, what this does is remove accountability of the organization to the city and places it in the hands of the funders. Now, we might have great funders, and maybe they are people who, don't really need accountability. But the reality is that if we hand over this control to a nonprofit, even if the rules are amazing at the start and the governance is amazing at the start and the board is made up of, inclusive people from around the city, there's no guarantee it'll stay that way. And the only real oversight that the city is going to have is if this program, and I'm actually for cameras. I think cameras are a much better solution than ShotSpotter and other things. But unless it's governed correctly, and unless it's under a public organization in which people can vote on it and don't have to have the money to be accepted onto the board, who don't have to have a connection to get placed on the board, if there's no voting on it, there's no real accountability. So I would encourage council to keep that in mind as the study goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you all for your comments. Thank you for your presentation. I think we all agree that it's going to take a lot of work. For council, the initial request was for a resolution to approve infrastructure, which again, as I said earlier, hopping from point A to point Z is just not the right thing to do. So with the questions and the comments, we continue to encourage the community to become engaged and involved. And we look forward for updates, whatever deemed possible. We would definitely love to make sure that we keep the public updated with information that is presented to us as well. So we look forward to hearing some information, updates, and then also thank you to Better York as well for starting something that is going to have a lot of conversation and discussion over the short-term future. It has in the past, and we look forward to the updates. Okay, moving on to ARPA funding request for 2023. And this originated from the mayor. So do you have anything?
Well, yes, hi. What I wanted to share with everybody is that the mayor had been working with the rest of administration and had been in communicate.
I'm sorry.
I think it is. I'm just not close enough. The mayor has been working with the directors and administration and city council to kind of move forward with additional ARPA projects that he has been based off of the immediate needs, and then also referencing council's ARPA suggestion plan that they had. So this is essentially, we did have several ARPA projects that rolled over from 2022 into the 2023 budget, and those were included and approved in the budget. And this is essentially the next round of projects that the mayor would like consideration of for use of ARPA funds. Now, I did want to give an update publicly in terms of where we are with the consultant. I have our agreement is signed with Answer Advisory, and I actually had 2 meetings with them this week regarding reporting, because quarter-end reporting is due next week, and they were right on it, and they're working with me in order to make sure that our reporting is in on time and caught up. So in the process of doing that, I've had to, of course, we've provided them all of the financial information in terms of all the projects thus far that we have budgeted and what expenses we have. And they have already thrown things out to us. I'm like, okay, you need to complete this, you need to complete that, so we can make sure that all of these boxes are checked and that these are projects that meet the criteria. And we're like, okay. So that is in progress. Now, of course, the priority at the moment has been the projects that we've already started to make sure we have the information we need for getting our reports caught up. But they are aware of these projects, and I have provided them with the draft ordinances to give them like the first idea of what we're looking at. And I'm also then completing their process in terms of giving additional information. So again, we can start from fresh with these projects in terms of reviewing their eligibility for ARPA funds, the use of ARPA funds, and then also any of the other details in the background. Who's the money going to? Is it internally? Is it externally? Is there subrecipients? That kind of stuff. So we have started with them, and I kind of pulled them to start with reporting before even the kickoff. So I'm working to get the details of exactly people say kickoff calls, but it's like, okay, what exactly are we going to talk in the kickoff call? So I make sure I have all the people involved that should be a part of it, because I want to make sure that the directors know who these folks are and what they're doing, and then obviously council knows what they're doing as well. The administrative contact for this is Assistant Business Administrator Dan Hebner. He was part of the RFP process, and he's been set up as the contact because we do want to kind of make sure that we've got one point of contact coming out in terms of utilizing the consultants, and also making sure that we're all working as a team internally, that we're not repeating questions, and that we're all on the same page in terms of what we're doing. So that is the update, is that we are well on our way to have our reporting all completely caught up and in the system by the 31st. And we have started the process of filling out their very established process in terms of determining eligibility and all of the T's crossed and I's dots for the project. So I wanted to give that update. Past that, I believe the mayor is just requesting the opportunity for the directors and the managers to kind of review these projects with you in this forum, with the idea that obviously it's at council's discretion if any of these, because these would all be budget amendment ordinances that would need to be introduced and then sit for a meeting and then approved. So the request is obviously that to have them added to an agenda for February, but knowing that it's at council's discretion.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council?
I would just say that I'd feel more comfortable after we meet with Answer before we address these individually and get them on agenda for votes.
I agree as well. And I have a question. The shot spotter, what is the amount for that? That wasn't indicated in our documents.
Dan Lentz, captain with York City Police Department. So it was in the year 2 ARPA ask, and then I don't know why it was broken out, but roughly, to answer your question, it's approximately $205,000 for the first year.
205,000? Okay, thank you.
What'd you say your name was again?
Dan Lentz.
Oh, I never recognized you.
Captain Dan Lentz.
He's in regular.
Recognize you.
I have another question.
Yes.
And what is the square mileage for that? I think the cost is related to the
Yeah.
area that's covered.
Yeah, I believe it was 2 million, or I'm sorry, 2 miles, 2 square miles.
I thought, okay.
And this cost includes the equipment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's different than, it's, like Mike Muldrow, it's different than what it had been before, like we discussed in the technology committee. The way they do it now is they basically bring everything in and you're kind of renting it. So what we were looking at the proposed after the technology group was to do that sample, to basically do a trial run in a certain area just to see if it really made for a better response, to see if we liked the results that we saw, and then continue to network with the technology group with whether or not we wanted to continue to come back in front of you guys for sustainability or more funding. So this was just a proof of concept trial.
Okay, thank you.
I've made it very clear that I would like to meet with Answer before anything else is brought to us with ARPA. Not that I'm opposed to these projects, they're internal, but we haven't received the update at all for ARPA. The appropriations from last year, no updates for us, and that's primarily because there wasn't a contact person or a person in charge for any of this. So I would like to get an overhaul of where we're at, and the consultants can help that, as well as BA's made it announced today. Gave us an update in emails as well today of what has been done so far. So we'll get a meeting, informational session set up with Answer, hopefully soon at a kickoff. So I look forward to that. Any questions or comments from the public? No.
Manuel Gomez, I want to clarify, if I may, when it came to this proof of concept and this pilot program, if that's what we're going to actually call it at its outset, with regards to ShotSpotter, there was a fair bit of discussion regarding what type of area they would deploy these sensors in. I wanted less. It was fair that law enforcement, given its purpose, wanted to establish a geography where they knew that the incidents are happening more or less. I don't know if that's going to be best for data gathering, but a lot went into establishing a lot of those boundaries. I think it was a fair discussion. I felt heard. Some of the concerns I still have, I'm expecting that I can hold off on them. Are we to have a committee session after you get your money's worth from Answer? Is that a fair expectation, if I can ask that?
Well, it'll have to be approved through a resolution. So it may go to committee or it might appear on the legislative agenda, but there'll be discussion. Do you need with the think tank? Are you talking about another meeting with the think tank or just here?
Right.
Okay.
I was wondering if, because it was appearing today.
Yeah, we're not sure just because we don't know when the meeting's going to be scheduled with Answer.
Gotta
But
get your money's worth from that big contract with that consultant.
oh, well, we're going to get our money's worth. But we'll have meetings with Answer, and there'll be discussion for all items for ARPA. So ShotSpotter is one of those items.
My request would be that this does see another committee session. Reason being is I would like to see, even if it's a summary, some sort of service level agreement. I want to see the policy baked into what we actually deploy in terms of what the actual agreement becomes. I don't want council to simply absolve its due diligence and say, okay, here's the resolution, and we agree to you actually executing the expenditure of the funds without actually putting some teeth into it. the Technology Advisory Group is a wonderful start, but the fact of the matter is that at any point, we can be treated as ad hoc, and they can leapfrog what the Technology Advisory Group is today. I don't anticipate it would happen, but what I would like to see is, again, in establishing best practices, that we make sure this is programmatic. One other suggestion I'd like to make is that we follow the notice and comment period structure that we have at an administrative level when we do such things as change a neighborhood and zoning has an item up for discussion. We actually notify those stakeholders that are directly placed in one way or another, and they're given a comment period so that they're not left to guess or to wonder what may have happened, but they're given a chance to be brought in. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And what I'm trying to say is if you're going to install sensors, let's say, in one community, you may want to establish some sort of geography. Use the same guidelines and that framework that you would for what the zoning and the planning process looks like, where you notify and you give that opportunity for comment. Why do I say this? Look at today. Even myself, and you would think I would know, I'm often the only person here not paid to be here. I say this often. I've been involved with this ShotSpotter discussion for 16 years, been along the way, each and every step. I didn't even know if ShotSpotter was actually going to be on the agenda till I clicked all the way through and double-checked and saw it as part of the issues chart. That's a little bit too obfuscated for my taste, and I think that the level of notice and discourse, we can raise it just a bit, and I think we'll all benefit from that type of openness.
So,
Thank you. Yes.
and this, Manuel, Commissioner, Captain Lentz, I think in that meeting that we also talked about a probationary period. We did, and I wish I had my notes with me. I don't, and I should have looked that up, so it wasn't just a blanket. And that would probably be included.
And thank you, Mike Muldrow again. I just want to say, because this is actually pretty cool because we're here and I don't have to just say I'm on record. I'm actually on record. I have Miss Washington, media's here and everything else. So on record, I want to say, and I was just talking with Captain Lentz, we were just discussing, we're committed to, before there would be any rollout or anything with respect to ShotSpotter, continuing to work with the think tank group to develop the policy and committing to the quarterly meetings to be able to continue to update with how we're feeling about the process and how we're feeling about the use of that technology. Everything we talked about in that meeting, we would be looking to do, and we're still committed to doing. So in front of everybody, I want to publicly say that, there won't be a ShotSpotter hung on anybody's pole or anything in the city until we work with everybody that was in that group to first draft the policy of what we're going to feel comfortable with, and then continuing to every quarter meet again and see what the results are looking like. So, or we just won't do it. Even if they approve the money, we just won't spend it until we get there. So.
And I also just want to say I was part of that group. As a council person, I thought it was my responsibility to hear the community. So I did not vote. And I made it clear that it was important to be there, that one of us, so we understand where the community is, where they're coming.
Good evening. Regina Mitchell from the York Housing Authority and Cone, the developer of Thaxton Park Phase 2. Changing the subject a little bit, I'm still here, and I've returned just to request the additional funding from the ARPA funds to remove the contaminated dirt or soil at Thaxton Phase 2 and to actually help us with the overage of the cost of drywall, which is just a supply chain issue that the community is feeling nationwide with certain building materials. But the contaminated soil has become an issue because we will not make our deadlines unless the soil is removed in a timely manner. We will be actually, the good news is the north side of College will be occupied by the end of February. So we will be occupying new units within the next 30 days. And I want to say within the next 14 days because we already have the applicants in place. But the problem is on the south side, 46 units, we cannot get substantial completion certifications from the city, from the state, and all of our funders until we can identify the funding for the contaminated soil, the removal of the contaminated soil to a regulated fill, and also for the overages of the drywall material. Which totals approximately about 450,000. 350,000 of that is associated with the contaminated soil. The other 100,000 is the overages for drywall, which is a lot. I heard somebody kind of said something behind me, but yeah, it's a lot. But we have kind of navigated a lot through with the supply chain shortages. Cost of lumber, we built at the height of lumber costs, and that's one of the issues we have overcome without any assistance from the state or from local government. But we are now faced with how to handle the contaminated soil, which is huge. We cannot put it any place. There are so many jokes I've heard about how to remove contaminated soil, but we can't remove it but to a regulated fill site. And why I continue to say it's an estimate until we get a date and time we move that soil, we don't know the final cost. So it's actually a market-driven number. So I would here to ask for the consideration from the council to actually grant us the additional funding so that we can make all of our deadlines and house families, the moderate income families into these new units. And I think most people don't realize that it's not just families. We have 1 bedrooms to 5 bedrooms, so we're talking a whole span of families and makeup of families for the city of York. So I appreciate the consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any council comment? Oh, we have another. Oh, come on up.
Hello, Ryan Brinkerhoff again. I'm coming up to just talk briefly about the ShotSpotter proposal. Councilwoman Walker, I believe you were there at the sort of sales pitch meeting that we had maybe 9 or 10 months ago with the representatives. Were any other council members attending just out of, you were there? Okay, perfect, okay. So, you know, I went into that meeting with an open mind and I did a little research beforehand. And what I found was that ShotSpotter is, at best, a controversial system. And that there were several studies, I believe one was from the Northwestern University Justice Center. There were several others that looked at case studies where ShotSpotter had been implemented. What they found was a severely increased 911 burden to 911 call centers. They found a significant increase to the police force, or sorry, a burden to the police force as they were forced to respond to the alarms that were set off by ShotSpotter. And they also found that the majority of these alarms were baseless. I'm happy to share this research with anyone in council if they're interested later. I'm more than happy to send it over. The problems that they pointed out was that there was no data verification for when ShotSpotter registered a shot. They would count anything in which a report was filed as a correct use of their system, whether or not there was any evidence actually found on scene, such as shell casings, witnesses, things like that, which draws into, you know, question a lot of their propositions about their system and also about the, you know, worthiness of placing such a burden on our 911 centers and on our police force. Finally, in that meeting, they also were very adamant that the results that they showed were not attributable to ShotSpotter solely. And in fact, every positive result that they showed in that sales pitch was, according to them, the result of a variety of factors, of which ShotSpotter was one of them, which, if anyone's a salesman here knows, they don't have data to really back up the product that they're selling. When I brought this up with them, the response from the consultant police chief that they had brought in to support the sales pitch was that the research that had been done by the Justice Center was motivated by anti-police bias and therefore shouldn't be paid attention to. I did not find that answer satisfactory, and we did not receive further clarification on some of these questions. So I would just reiterate what Manuel said about the need for further discussion about this issue specifically and for more input from the public once the public has had an opportunity to learn the reality of the product that's being sold here. We've got a lot of other options that we could be looking at. The camera system, I think, is a much better option that has actual proven benefits in cities around the country. Again, I have concerns about governance, but that can be handled, right? We can work through that. But we've also got people like Tiffany Lowe at Wellspan, who's doing outreach to the community after violence occurs. This is a program that could be increased with this $200,000 that's going into surveillance technology. We've got the ability to bring together nonprofit partners, much in the way as we have for the camera program, but also research partners at your college to look at what other cities are doing to deal with the violence problem. We're in an age where Chicago, New York, San Francisco are taking a lead on reforming the justice system and looking at it from top down. Not all of those options are working, but we could take advantage of the money that they are spending and the research that they're doing and pick what works and doesn't to help our city instead of sending money to another company that looks at the tragedy and heartbreak of a city like York and sees an opportunity for profit. And so I would really encourage us to think deeply about this before we approve this as a line item. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Muldrow, did you want to say anything in regards to it, or do we want?
I'm going to say it because I'm amongst family. I'm here in York. ShotSpotter's on the call. So at this point, I would say, do they want to say anything? Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, members of the council, for allowing me to say a few words. My name is Ron Teachman. I'm a former police chief twice, a former customer of ShotSpotter before I joined the company over 7 years ago. And my title is Director of Public Safety Solutions. Just to quickly respond to some of the comments made a minute ago. As to the report, I believe is referencing the MacArthur Justice Report. My understanding is that was done mostly by student interns, and they were measuring the outcome of dispatches to the Chicago police by whether the Chicago police, already very busy, filed lengthy police reports as to every ShotSpotter alert. And the failure to file a police report inferred that there was no gunfire. That is not the case. In fact, we've had outside analysis done by a group of PhDs who looked at our data, and they determined that we're not with false positives, that our false positive rate is about 0.5%. And although we're giving you a contractual guarantee of our performance at 90% notification, we actually performed about 97%. Our service level agreement, which will be part of the proposal that's before you, includes not only our comprehensive notification, but a guarantee of performance as to time within 60 seconds, within geographic location, accuracy of 25 meters, and to be in service to 99.9% of the time. I would say not only is the outside consultant Edgeworth Analytics verifying our efficacy, but the fact that we're in over 140 cities, we had a 99% customer retention rate over the last 3 years, I think speaks volumes. What we do promise is high performance of gunshot detection and notification, and our customers understand that. That results in a high retention rate, but also the fact that they realize that ShotSpotter gets public safety to respond when gunshots occur, to find victims to save lives, to speak to witnesses nearby, gather forensic evidence to help solvability, but also to engage with the immediate neighborhood where people have been exposed to gunfire, perhaps even traumatized, and to show that engagement leading to community trust. We are effective in that way, and that's why we have the data to support the customer loyalty and the efficacy that I spoke of. And happy to answer any other questions you may have at this time.
Manuel Gomez, thank you for your input. This raises the stakes. I did not know that we had a representative here to vouch for the technology.
This is a surprise all around.
But this allows us to engage in a little bit of much needed discussion. Why I raised the question of service level agreements, Durham recently instituted ShotSpotter technology into their communities. there was a very high-profile shooting that was missed. As this shooting was missed, naturally, members of the community said, well, what happened to your newfangled technology? Why didn't it capture these very, very apparent gunshots that to the ear were easily noticed? What they said was twofold, and please, sir, correct me if this is in any way not accurate. ShotSpotter responded in essence, well, our service level agreement told you that during certain periods, such as New Year's or July 4th, ShotSpotter is basically defunct or decommissioned or just down on standby. Why? Because those handy-dandy algorithms and those very trained ears that they do like to tout can't distinguish between fireworks and gunshots or any other noises that exist in the ambient environment. Basically, they washed their hands of the incident and said, we put it in the contract that on these certain dates, we won't be able to actually determine what's gunfire. Keep that in mind, please. And this is why we should lead with our expectations based off what's really being offered. If they tell you 99% or any other number, actually qualify what the number means in black and white and see what it actually entails, not only from a legal basis, but also for us on the ground. What should our expectation be with regards to this very expensive technology? If you're telling me that there's another component where they say that they haven't yet calibrated their equipment in a place like Durham. One of the questions I'm going to have for the Technology Advisory Group is, what is the anticipated time frame for us here in York? Because Durham is Durham, Chicago is Chicago, and New York is New York. Here in York, in our backyard, how long will it take and what's the anticipated time frame? I want it on record for us to calibrate our equipment. Are we going to wait a year? Are we going to wait a year after this initial expense and this outset of expenditures to calibrate this equipment and say, okay, it's reached that threshold of accuracy? Or are we going to be up and running, say, in 6 months? I think that these are questions worth having answered. I think it's wonderful that we have the gentleman here to answer those two questions against. Service level agreements, what does it mean for us? Maybe speak a little bit to the Durham situation where ShotSpotter washed its hands of it and said we had no legal requirement for those time periods to actually identify these gunshots. And also, would it really take over a year to calibrate your equipment, as is what's been relayed in Durham, that it can take up to over a year, which is, of course, typical for most ShotSpotter deployments. Is that something that has evolved, or is that still what we should expect as an anticipated time frame in terms of calibration? And I'll end this with one final statement. I have to be honest, I can't reveal necessarily some of the discussions that I've had, only for the sense that some of them were sort of off the cuff, but I was able to speak to, just through various levels of involvement, with some members of law enforcement in other jurisdictions. And that's why I want to maintain discretion, not name any names and jurisdictions, but accuracy doesn't seem to be much of an issue with ShotSpotter as it used to be in the past. I think that once you get to that service level agreement point and you understand what it is that you're purchasing, because it is expensive, and what it is that's being offered, I have heard good feedback, and I do feel that the ethical thing to do, biased as I may be, because I'm always focused on oversight and bringing power more towards the people, that some of the concerns we had previously have now morphed into other things. I want to know why your artificial intelligence didn't help you calibrate on a more rapid time frame, and what that means for us as a prospective client.
So I'll try to answer some of those concerns and unpack your questions. As to the artificial intelligence, it's important to understand that the main function AI serves is to filter out those noises that the system detects that are not gunfire, because they don't match the characteristics acoustically before that data package is sent for human review. The humans elevate our service by adding their expertise, as you alluded to, the trained ear, looking at the waveform configuration, but also looking at the sensor participation, where fireworks, for example, radiate omnidirectionally and gunfire is rather linear. Forgive me, I don't have an understanding of what took place in Durham. Our account manager, we call him a custom success director, may be able to speak to that. I can speak more generally as to why it may have been missed. I'm not sure if it was in the period of calibration, if it had to do with the holidays, or as we state in our service level agreement, we don't guarantee detection of gunfire under 25 caliber because of the acoustic nature of that low ammunition, and also anything shot indoor or within a vehicle or anything that may be suppressed because of those acoustic conditions. So that's clearly stated in the service level agreement. It's unfortunate that a high profile situation happened early on in our relationship with Durham that led to that, but I don't have the facts as to what occurred as to why we didn't notify in that instance. So I'm sorry, I can't speak to that, but I can speak generally about our SLA. And as to the calibration period, I think that will be discussed with the city fully as we go to deploy before we go live and then consider you a subscribing customer. There may be a period where we do that testing prior to go live. And also I'll say that in that build out phase, approaching go live, is certainly the policy will be developed at that point. There's a training that occurs that we're responsible for with the members of the York PD. And we train not only to the technology, but train to the policy.
Manuel Gomez, thank you for your responses. I find them to be instructive and elucidating. I would have hoped that you were more on the cusp of those developments in Durham, as it is in its infancy in terms of the relationship with ShotSpotter. I do tend to look towards Durham and what it's doing sort of as a guide for what we may anticipate here. And to be quite honest, sort of not to blame the current administration and the current product for the sins of that horrible, horrible system that we had here in place back 16 years ago and so on. If you would indulge me, what is your opinion with regards to the ability of your trained operators reclassifying the data that's captured from ShotSpotter? I believe that that's something that we should look at closely. Perhaps you may agree it's one of the more controversial aspects of your technology. You seem to rely as a company on the artificial intelligence on one hand. Other times you move that discussion towards your trained ears, and between the two, you sort of burn both ends of the rope. Which one do you think we should be looking to rely on? And would you be willing to accept that reclassification either should only happen in their very, very extremely and defined limited circumstances, or not at all? And that when it does happen, it should happen with very explicit alert and prompts to the community as to who's doing the reclassification and why.
Thank you. So there are very strict guidelines within the Incident Review Center, and those folks are evaluated regularly for their accuracy. I would maintain that our best service to our customers occurs when there's a dual factor classification, that the machine filtration takes place first, and then the human takes that information and has a review. Let me also take a moment and clarify what I think some media outlets have perhaps confused in the public arena, and that is there's another level of examination that takes place by our forensic experts. And the best analogy, and I'm trying to be brief, the best analogy I could offer all of you is think about when a crime scene technician is deployed to a situation where a crime has occurred. Now, patrol officers respond to all sorts of things, but in a serious case, particularly homicide, non-fatal shooting, things like that, burglaries, you may be seeing the van come, and what happens is that technician has the benefit of training, tools, technology, and time that the patrol officer didn't have. When you read the patrol officer's report, it may not have all the facts and circumstances in the crime scene examiner's report. You say there's a conflict here. That the patrol officer wasn't capable. It's given the circumstance of patrol officer getting to the scene immediately, handling the matter, and then securing the scene for that secondary person to come in. So our forensic engineers work in a silo, if you will, separate apart from that first evaluation. And because they have the time, ordinarily it takes them 8 to 10 hours to do a detailed forensic report that then becomes court admissible as notarized, and they testify in court behind that. Any inconsistencies is due to the fact that they had the training, tools, technology, and time. And those inconsistencies are often brought up in the media. That's because what the Incident Review Center people do is try to adhere to our 60-second notification, because it's important to get to victims right away to save lives. And they're not perfect, but we certainly adhere to our SLA of 90%. And with, again, a false positive rate the last several years of 0.5%. But I just want to distinguish forensic engineers working in a more controlled environment with tools that are not available to the original Incident Review Center folks. But back to your original question, we would maintain that adding the human layer to the machine classifier best serves our customers.
Thank you. So, Mike Muldrow again, sort of kind of bringing it all home, or in conclusion, for the benefit of the group and for City Council, I just want to first start by thanking your company for being here and taking time on the hot seat. You all know when you first came down, and Captain Lentz was here, when your company first came down to pitch us, I was not a proponent. I was not a fan. I will admit that. He knows that. And it's funny you bring up what you bring up, Manuel, because what ended up selling me on coming to you all and having that conversation about going down this road and looking at it as another tool is the difference between now and 16 years ago. Because to put what he just said and what Manuel was talking about in perspective, everybody else in the room needs to understand that the people listening to what we heard on the recording 16 years ago was us. That's the difference. 16 years ago, when we paid all that money for ShotSpotter, it was a recording device that sat in the station, and one of our sergeants had to hurry back to the station, listen to the call themselves, decide what they thought it was, and then call somebody on the street to go out there. You're talking about a 7 to 10 minute process, because County Control, who also got the notification and had the ability to listen to it, they said, we're dispatchers. We don't know what we're listening to at all. So they weren't able to help us. And then it was useless to have a sergeant or a patrol officer have to drive from the other end of town back to 50 West King Street, go inside, listen to it, think what they thought it was, and then dispatch somebody out to it. It basically ended up being a complete waste of money. The thought that there are professionals that are being trained, and there are, like he said, AI, there's software that has since been designed that is listening to these things, that is looking at the things, paying attention to it, looking at the characteristics, and then doing for us all it's intended to be, a guide for helping us get to the places we need to get to. 75 to 80% of our shootings, shots fired calls, so let me correct myself, in New York City are on the street. So I get it probably won't help for incidents that happen in houses, but nearly 80% of our shots fired calls happen in the street in New York City that aren't all reported, don't all go reported, and we know why. We have a traumatized community that doesn't feel comfortable being the person that has to call in, grab the phone, call in and say, I just heard this or I just saw this. So this, like the cameras and like everything else we're starting to lean towards, is one more tool to help make our community feel more comfortable while we do the push to make them safer. So I just, in conclusion, and thank you all for being here. Manuel, thank you for your input. Thank you for the questions. You know the stuff that you bring to light, just like in the think tank. And we thank you for the willingness to go here with that initial trial run with the reevaluations quarterly. But I do think it's commendable that you all, as a company who as vast as you are and in many locations that you're in, thought it not robbery to be here tonight here in York, even if it's over via Zoom, to be able to answer these tough questions. So I just want to say that in conclusion. So you guys, I know you have other items, but I just wanted to say that and say thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Just to follow up, in 2021, Michael Walker, in 2021, just a quick question here. 2021, there was a report by the Chicago Inspector's General's Office as it regarded ShotSpotter, questioning the operational value of ShotSpotter in one of the key experimental places that was this program has been instituted. Do you have a formal response to the Chicago Inspector General's report regarding that operational value? And if you do, would you be able to link it to or give us a link to that so that we can review that, and also for City Council? Second point, Michael Williams. AP did a report on a gentleman by the name of Michael Williams who was in jail for about 1.5 years based on evidence from ShotSpotter, which goes to my third point. Northwestern, MacArthur's Law School, PhDs, etc., did a report in 2021 that questioned a couple of things: transparency, the methodology, when ShotSpotter is actually used in these police reports or in criminal investigations. That particular aspect has yet to be released about the transparency and the process of how, or in the methodology. So if we can get a response, or if you have a formal response to the Chicago Inspector General's report, it would be awesome if we could get that, and also if the City Council can get that, so that they can review the responses as it regards operational value in a city that we know has a gun violence problem. Number two, the transparency of how this particular technology and the reports from that technology are used in criminal investigations. I know that's more of a local situation, but the issue with Northwestern was the transparency of how the algorithms, et cetera, were used in order to prosecute persons outside. And they use an example, Michael Williams, who, after using this evidence with ShotSpotter, ended up being released because that evidence was faulty. So we're now at the issue of lives being affected by this particular program, and we understand that this program, by definition and by information demographically, is instituted in communities of color. So we need to be sure that this particular program, this particular technology is fair and is not biased. And if we can get that confirmation, I think you'll make a whole group of folks here much more at ease with your technology. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Members of the council, may I proceed to respond to that?
Yes.
Thank you. So a lot to unpack there as well. I'll be brief in terms of the response to the OIG report. My colleague Jack Pontius is here on the call as well. We can send that written statement from the company to the council, maybe through the commissioner or captain who's in attendance, and they could forward that to you. We do have a written response available. Let me just speak quickly about the Michael Williams case, which I still think is under some litigation. Quick set of facts on that, and I'll speak to all arrests made as a result of a ShotSpotter alert. What ShotSpotter proposes to do and does do is to hear noises, discern which of those are gunfire, do that quickly and effectively and accurately so we can have a public safety response to save lives, gather evidence, and engage the community. ShotSpotter will help tell the police what happened when it happened, and where it happened. We don't conclude the who or the why. That's the role of law enforcement. ShotSpotter did not direct the police to arrest Mr. Williams. In fact, my understanding of that case is that arrest didn't take place until 3 months after the alert was given, and when our standing on that event didn't align with the prosecutor's theory of the case was when the case was dropped, because we maintained one set of facts that happened and the prosecutor went a different direction. And so that is why, and that's what led, I believe, to his release. But as I said, I think that case is still in litigation. We tell you what happened, when it happened, and where it happened, and not who and not why. The last point I'll address is to the demographics generally as to where ShotSpotter is deployed in any city. It is true that very often ShotSpotter is deployed in poor communities, which are often represented by people of color, Black and brown. When you look at the victimization in America, who's getting shot, who's suffering direct bullet wound injuries leading to death or disability, which neighbors are suffering the traumatization of repeated exposure to gun violence, it is those communities. ShotSpotter is trying to work in partnership with our police agencies to better serve and protect, not over police, and we are very, very mindful of that issue, not to over-incarcerate. We're not advocating mass incarceration. We're talking precision policing, identifying the very small population in York and other cities that are driving the violence, the handful of folks that are serial trigger pullers, identifying them and holding them accountable for their behavior, and at some point isolating them from the community as they maintain a public threat. Just like with COVID, nobody liked all lockdowns, wanted to be very scientific with the data to quarantine people briefly. I would submit that that's our philosophy here at ShotSpotter, identifying those serial trigger pullers that are threatening our society, victimizing our neighbors, and then making those communities safer that have historically been underserved and underprotected.
Don't want to prolong this. Michael Walker, and I thank you for your response. I think one of the critical issues that remains unanswered is this. In reviewing the Michael Williams case, the issue was that, if I remember correctly, that the fact of there being the presence of a particular gun in that particular vicinity where the ShotSpotter program said there was that activity was at question on whether or not he was the person, because he was in that particular vicinity, that actually shot the gun. I believe ShotSpotter said yes. Again, this is something. This leads to a bigger question, one that Northwestern brought up, not just me. When the technology says there is a shot fired in a community, and it says, according to the Inspector General's report, it continued to send more and more officers into that community. There is an aspect of over-policing. That is just something that happens because this is what the program does. The issue is making sure that these alerts are true and specific enough where everyone is not being thrown into that group in that particular neighborhood and that community. And that's one of the issues that we're hoping to have addressed in your responses here, just as a clarification to the point that you made.
Let me just briefly say, particularly under the leadership of Commissioner and his staff, we fully expect that the York Police Department will maintain constitutional policing. The fact that a gunshot occurs at a particular location doesn't mean that everybody in the near vicinity is subject to arrest. Police have to establish articulable suspicion to briefly maintain, stop, or maybe stop and frisk. There needs to be probable cause that leads to an arrest. And I'll leave it to the commissioner to state now or going forward what his training, what his policy, what his review is of his officers' behavior to maintain that constitutional policing. I'll go back to what I said earlier. We tell you what happened, a gunshot occurred, where it happened with geographic specificity, and when it happened, time stamping to the millisecond. That is our job, and I think we do it rather effectively. We'll let our police officials in those jurisdictions answer those questions about specific incidents. Commissioner?
Thank you. And I just wanted to say, again, like at least for me, and then I'll go sit down, I promise you guys, versus right now, the detection of gunshots, particularly outside, are only occurring two ways. Either Mrs. Johnson grabs her phone, calls 911 and says, I hear gunshots outside my house, and has to deal with the feeling of the concern of fallout from that. Or our officers, no matter where they are, who they are, how familiar they are with weapons, are either driving in a car, walking around, or I walk out of City Hall tonight, stand on the street corner on my way to the truck, and I hear out yonder somewhere where I think is a gunshot, and I grab my phone or my radio and I say, hey, and Lentz can attest to this because we've all done it for years now. We get on the radio and we say, hey, I think I hear gunfire, and it sounds like it's coming from the 400 block or of wherever. Or not even 400 block. It sounds like it's coming from out west over here around so-and-so and so. So that's what we're currently doing. Either Mrs. Johnson has to call and say the shots are out front of my house, or officer has to stop, make sure his radio is down, put his ear out of his car, cup, and say, I think I hear it coming from somewhere. If we're satisfied with that in 2023 as our only way to detect gunfire in this city, so be it. We'll continue to fight that way. But that's where we're at. So.
Brian McGrath again. I will make this my last comment of the evening in the interest of time. I just wanted to say that I share Chief Muldrow's admiration of Mr. Teachman and Mr. Pontius, though maybe not for the same reasons for being here tonight. I wanted to just a few things they brought up. Some of the hand waving regarding the Northwestern report. They did come out with their own response, but we want to be very clear that was from a hired consulting firm that specializes in antitrust lawsuits in class classification, certification, and intellectual property disputes. This was not a unbiased research partner that was teamed with for this. This was someone who was paid to produce a statement. Second, you're absolutely right, Chief Muldrow, that this is not an acceptable state to be identifying gunshots. But if the city of Chicago is determined that it's better to be doing it that way than to be getting it from ShotSpotter, then I think that's something we should take very seriously. And I look forward to seeing the response from ShotSpotter. One would presume that it would be publicly available if it was something they were as confident in. And I will leave it as that. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your discussion and public comment. Is there any other council comment? Administration comment? Our next committee meeting will be on March 1st, 2023, council chambers. Agenda items are due by 12 noon on February 22nd, 2023. This meeting is adjourned. Have a good night.